taking. Yes, the meeting is being recorded. So if you prefer to have your camera off, we understand that, but we've gotten multiple requests to share the recording. So we are looking forward to spreading that out broadly. Okay, so as I was saying, we're going to begin with our land acknowledgement as a practice that Earth Ministry is really leaning into to start all of our gatherings together. So a deep breath. The Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light Community, works within the unceded territories of Northwest Native nations across the Pacific Northwest. Our office is on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish, past, present, and future. And we do this land acknowledgement as just one way to resist erasure of Indigenous histories, as well as to honor the Coast Salish tribes and the land itself. Okay, well, thank you. This is Earth Ministry's Faithful Advocacy training, in case you've lost track of what Zoom you're on today. And we know it's a bit of a late one in the long nights of January. So thank you for being here with us. I'll just give a short shout out to our staff in the room, as well as we've got some board members and former board members present. So good to see you all. And if you want to say hi, I'm going to toss it. You've heard a little bit from Lindsay, but I'll let Lindsay introduce herself, and then we can go to Nancy next.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay. I am the program assistant at Earth Ministry WAIPL. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also a fellow through the Episcopal Service Corps program, and I am partnered with St. Mark's Cathedral here in Seattle. So I'm excited to be here. I'm very excited for the advocacy season, where I'll be doing a lot of work with our legislative session. So I'll toss it to Nancy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Nicholas. I'm the Interim Executive Director for Earth Ministry. I am also, I'm out here in the Bothell Mill Creek area, attend the Cedar Cross United Methodist Church, and I'm excited to be here, having heard so much about how wonderful faith advocacy, wonderful changes that faith advocacy can achieve. I'm looking forward to tonight. I also want to do a brief commercial. We have announced the position for executive director, and if you could help us spread the word, our job description is on the website, and we're trying to get it out to as many people as possible. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to tonight. And do we have any other staff here, Jess?
I think that is good. I see we have Rabbi Zeri here from our board, as well as Janet. I'm sorry if I'm missing any other current board members, but that is our team here this evening. So you're mostly going to be hearing from me tonight. Lindsay will be sharing our bills later on, but the primary purpose of this event is to give you the tools to feel confident really speaking up as a faithful advocate, and explaining really what that even means. So I do a lot of these workshops at individual houses of worship, and it's exciting with the Zoom world that we're on. This is our first kind of combo community-wide advocacy training. But before we dive in, I'm kind of curious about folks' entry points. So let us show by a sign of fingers your comfort level with advocacy. So 1 would be, I really don't know. I'm here 100% as a newbie to learn. Awesome, we're so glad you're here. 5 would be like, oh yeah, I do this I mostly want to hear what your priorities are. 3 is that middle ground. So if you want to show with a number of fingers raised, that will help me just get a sense. And there's no judgment, of course. Let me get to my other screen here. Keep your fingers up. It's good to have to go to multiple screens. Okay, great. I see some new Faithful Advocates, awesome. I see some, a good number of the in-between, which makes sense, and then some rock stars out there. So that is great. And if you are a seasoned advocate, I believe there's always more that we can learn. So hopefully you still get some takeaways here. Just to give you a sense of where we're going tonight, I am going to start with kind of an overview of what Faithful Advocacy is and how it's impactful. We'll then get into really what it looks like in action and how we encourage you to share your story. And then we will have our legislative priorities, just a really brief introduction of them at the end. If you are hoping for more in-depth info on our legislative priorities, that will be coming. We will be teaching at Interfaith Advocacy Day at the Eastern Washington Legislative Conference. Those are the spaces where we'll go more into detail about the policies we're supporting, but we do want to give you a primer as the state legislative session opened yesterday. And you'll even be able to get to sign in for one of those bills that we're supporting. So that is our plan for our time together. I do have some slides to share with you all, so I'm going to be screen sharing. But if you have questions that arise, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, which Lindsay will be monitoring for us. And I'll try to pause regularly. This is less of an interactive event. Normally we like to try to have space for breakout rooms and all of that. So you're going to have to hear my voice a fair bit tonight, but that's just because I really want you to receive a lot of tools and information from this. So bear with me and don't hesitate to ask questions or ask me to go into more detail on something as we move along. So with that, let me pull up my slides here. Oops, I still have our job announcement up instead of the slides. You'd think like 2 years in, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm super slick with screen sharing on Zoom. It's okay.
And excuse me for interrupting, Jessica, this is Dave Ketter.
Hey, Dave.
I'm sorry I was a little bit late. I couldn't find the Zoom link. And, but wondering, it is being recorded, but will it be posted on your website?
Yes, it will. And we're actually we're hoping to get a quick turnaround on processing the recording. So we're hoping to email this out tomorrow along with some written information on our legislative priorities. So you can
Awesome.
Look for that hopefully tomorrow, maybe Thursday, depending on how the universe goes.
Yes. Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, and of course my slides are being persnickety and not wanting to load. I apologize. Give me a minute here. My 2013 laptop's not happy with the new year. Oh my gosh, I had it all ready to go. I see a question in the chat while I'm waiting here. MNCJ is the Multi-Faith Network for Climate Justice. So this is an Earth Ministry WAIPL affiliate based in Bellingham, Washington. And they're doing really awesome work. So Dave is their, one of the leads there on their advocacy work, which he reports back to their social action committee on.
And we have Karen Delanius and Kevin Clark on the call as well. And
Oh,
maybe
good.
more that I haven't seen yet.
Okay. Let's give this a go. Are you able to see my screen that says loading? Okay, that's not particularly helpful, is it? But hopefully it will actually
Yes, we can.
load. I was hoping it would come up. Lindsay, would you be able to pull up the slides on your device and share it? I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to give up on trying to do this and let Lindsay share it. And so while she is pulling it up, I'll just begin ad hoc. So Earth Ministry WAIPL has an approach that I like to call faith forward to our advocacy. So our hope is that you show up unapologetically as a person of faith, and that you bring that into the environmental justice campaign spaces that we show up within. I think that there is somewhat of a vortex that can pull us into the secular world with environmental issues, which is not hating on the secular world. We need that. We need the policy folks and the economists and the scientists and all of that. But we bring something really unique as people of faith in sharing the moral message of the need for climate justice. So that's why I really like to say faith forward. I see Kristen likes that term because we bring something different to kind of ground the conversation in values that can resonate across different divides. So to begin, what is advocacy? Let's have a click here, Lindsay. You're gonna have to do a lot of clicks, sorry. Advocacy is, in general, speaking up to influence the political, economic, and social institutions that we find ourselves swimming in all around. It is addressing root causes of social justice issues through public policy, and it can be called democracy in action. So, you know, many of you might know Jessie Dye, our former staff. She used to joke that advocacy is a year-round exercise. It's not like you can go to the gym once every 4 years and call it good. So we're not just showing up as voters in the big elections. We're showing up all throughout the legislative and democratic process. Okay, let's have a click again. So then let's put side to side what is faithful advocacy and where it kind of shows up differently. So faithful advocacy is speaking up for systemic justice based on our religious values and our traditions. So it's having our spiritual guidance for what we would like to see in terms of co-creating a just and a loving society, and doing that through addressing those root causes. And it's faith in action. So I like to think that for me, advocacy is not like a secondary part of my faith life, but is really a central piece of how I express my love for creation and community and of the neighbor, as I am called to from my location as a Christian in the Lutheran tradition. We'll go to the next slide. And we can send out these slides to you all. So if you're someone who really wants to write everything down, don't worry, you can get them later for really picking up all those pieces. So then what makes something kind of faithful advocacy? What are the key attributes that we bring into this when we approach advocacy in a way that's faith forward? First, it is values-based. So this is the big thing, is that we are really showing up to clearly articulate our values and move the conversation from the head more into the heart. Facts are good, facts are great, but what people remember when their head hits the pillow at the end of the night is a good story. So if I say something like, I really want to see a future where we have reduced air pollution, and I was at this event and I heard a child who was maybe, I don't know, 8, say that he just thought everyone grew up with asthma, and that's the way the world was. And that broke my heart. And that is not the future I want to see for any potential children that I might have, for the loved ones in my life, for kids I don't know across Washington State. I want our kids to grow up in a place where they can say, you know, my predecessors valued clean air enough that they invested in my future, and here we are. So there's just a little ad hoc example. But really those heart-centered pieces are what can actually move a decision maker and can really create a powerful shift in the narrative of a conversation. With these values, justice and equity are really at the core there. And so a piece of this is that we want to, as much as possible, follow the leadership of impacted communities. So not speak on behalf of communities, but alongside, amplify messages that we're asked to from tribal nations, from BIPOC communities, and really show up in a way that is a practice of allyship and solidarity. Earth Ministry has our justice, equity, diversity, inclusion statement, which is what really guides our work and is how we approach what issues we're going to engage on. So we're always looking for the justice and equity pieces at the core of our advocacy. And then with our values, we also bring hope. So we believe in God's grace and goodness in the movement of the spirit, or the arc of the universe bending towards justice. And that is so important when we're dealing with really big, daunting issues. I've been doing advocacy for 8, going on 9 years, and I've seen so many of my colleagues in the secular environmental movement burn out and move on to completely different careers because it can be really heavy. So for me, I have to do this work through my faith. It's how I hold hope through it all, and believe that we are all one piece of the puzzle and all have gifts to share. We're getting our slides back here. Our next attribute is that faithful advocacy builds bridges. So this is super important, that we can kind of act as a mediating presence for more dialogue, collaboration. An awesome example is that Earth Ministry was part of the negotiations around shutting down Washington's last coal-fired plant, the TransAlta plant in Centralia. And we kind of sat down and had a pastor at a table with the folks from the plant, with the environmentalists. That pastor kind of mediated the conversation, ensuring nobody would be left behind. We did come to consensus and are phasing out that plant, and it's actually now becoming Washington's largest solar farm. And the job transition and retraining is all a part of that. So another example is we do work around recovery of lower Snake River salmon, which can be really a contentious issue in the eastern half of our state. And so we've had a series of events called Loaves and Fishes, where we bring together different community members to just be open and hear from one another and gather around the table and talk. So this is a gift that we can bring as the faith community. And is super valuable and important. It can also give us more opportunities to speak with elected officials. So one of my favorites is a former US Congressperson, Dave Reichert, in the Issaquah area. We met with him about some land use policies that we were supporting. And he's Lutheran, I'm Lutheran. We hit it off around that. I think I shared a Luther quote or something, but we connected about our shared faith tradition, and then had built a relationship. Earth Ministry built a relationship. We'd have regular constituent meetings. And eventually he was one of, I think, 5 Republicans who opposed Arctic drilling, which was something Earth Ministry wrote to him at a really crucial time and asked. So that's another example about how we can open doors that might be more challenging with entryways from the more mainline approach. And finally, faithful advocacy is supported by community, which kind of goes with our hopeful piece here, but is really important in terms of sustaining our work and keeping us going, but then also amplifying our message. So I often joke that when I do show up and testify at a hearing or something, I feel like Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings, when he has the ghost army behind him and kind of sweeps in to save the day. That's a bit of a hyperbole, but I do feel like I have a community at my back in that we gather around these values that we are naming so clearly to our decision makers. I don't speak for my community. That's something to be mindful of. So I don't say, oh, everybody at Ballard First Lutheran Church thinks just like I do about this one policy. But instead I can say, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about care for creation and climate justice, and here's an opportunity for us to act on that I'm looking to you for your leadership on. We're doing what we can in our community. You should do what you can as our elected leaders. Also very pragmatically, decision makers know that people of faith vote. So we are a group that tends to be listened to just because there's high voter turnout among people of faith. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So I'm just going to share briefly the some impacts of faithful advocacy, and then we'll pause for any questions. So in case you're not sold yet, which, you know, y'all are here, so not too concerned, but here are some kind of tangible impacts of our work as faithful advocates. So it's always good to remember that elected officials work for you. Their job is to represent you, and they need to hear from you in order to do that. And I think sometimes we think if our electeds are aligned with our values, that we don't need to bother contacting them. That is one takeaway that I want you to have from this event, is always be in touch as much as you can, because it only takes 7 contacts to influence a decision maker one way or another. And that isn't a jump from a no to a yes on something. It's more incremental than that. So if it's something that they hadn't even thought of, they would say, oh, I might need to take a look into that and learn about it. If they're a no, they might reconsider. If they're a yes, they might hear from 7 people and say, oh, wow, this is a big deal to my district. I should be more of a champion for this issue. And that might be enough to encourage them to go across the aisle and really pick up the issue in a bolder way. So really, you know, 7 contacts is not very many. And so I find, I don't know, reassurance in that. And we'll talk later more about the ways that you can contact your electeds. The other thing that I've heard directly from state legislators is that they share our stories. So when we show up and do speak from the heart and do share a good story, that is like a tool that we are giving them to go and share with their colleagues. So when a bill is up for debate on the floor, that might be where they say, you know, somebody from my district met with me this week, sent me an email, told me this story about a kid who just thought everyone had asthma. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about that. And because of that, I really think we need to have the strongest climate protections in this bill that we're discussing, et cetera. So we're giving them resources when we share our stories. I mentioned earlier that we can provide the moral anchor for an issue. I think that's really important because a lot of times you can get policy just gets so wonky so fast. So a lot of times with our advocacy, especially with state agencies that we're advocating to, so the Department of Ecology, the Department of Health, we talk to them a lot, especially about bill implementation after we've passed the bills, how we're actually going to bring them to life. It is kind of our role there is mostly to show up and remind them that their decisions impact real people. And we saw an awesome example of this last year. The Earth Ministry WAIPL community was 82% of the total comments on looking at implementing the phase out of toxic PFAS chemicals in food packaging. like burger wrappers, pizza boxes, stuff like that. And the department wrote out that due to stakeholder input, they were going to speed up the timeline. So that was us. That was them hearing us and responding positively, which was, one of the best emails I've gotten in the last year, to show that we are reminding them that, oh wait, yeah, the timing does matter here because real people are ordering pizza every day. Fancy that. Finally, faithful advocacy can be a complement to what you're doing in your individual life, in your household, in your house of worship. It's important for us to do our piece, to live more lightly on the planet when and where it is feasible for us. But we also need to do the wider level policy reform. So it's a both and situation, with doing what we can do to unplug, to turn off the lights, drive less, etc., eat organic, but also we need to have those options more broadly accessible and woven into our states and local policy. And then last, again, central to active faith. So I spoke about this earlier, but it is central, not secondary, to how we show up. And for me, it's like one of the main ways I show up as a person of faith. So I think that has an impact also when speaking out to the broader community members that the faith community does care about these issues, which is not always the message that is received through the media. Okay, so we will pause our screen sharing there. And I just want to ask if there are any questions so far with this broad picture overview of faithful advocacy in general. And you can use the raise hand feature or just raise your hand and unmute and ask any questions you might have. Everyone's feeling good? We want to keep rolling? I see some nods. Okay. Well then, the lecture will carry forward. Lindsay, you can bring our slides back up and I'll just keep rolling here. While she's doing that, I'll just say too, y'all, I got my COVID booster last night, so I'm like a little under par. Really feel free to ask me to clarify if something I'm going on about doesn't quite track for you. But hooray for vaccines. Okay, so we're going to talk in this next section about what faithful advocacy really looks like in action. And I just want to start by ripping off the Band-Aid about the boundaries of faith community participation in advocacy in general. So I get a lot of questions about this. The takeaway is you cannot do partisan politics. So that means you cannot endorse candidates, tell other people to vote for particular candidates, do candidate campaigning with community resources. So you can't do anything related to elections of people as a house of worship. It's the same rules that Earth Ministry has as a 501c3 nonprofit. But you can, let's have the next click here, participate in the nonprofit advocacy. So this is nonpartisan voter engagement. So it is 100% legal for your faith community to take a position on an issue, a bill, a ballot measure. You have to go through, each community has their own internal process of what it might look like to actually endorse something. And sometimes that's more work than it might be worth, depending on what your process is. But it is totally legal that you can do that. You can also do get out the vote work. You can educate others. You can ask your elected officials to vote a certain way. So that's the careful line is you can talk to the people that you've already put into office. You just can't lobby around getting them there. So you can, if you have the support of your congregation's leadership, show up and say, our community has endorsed this and we want to see your yes vote on XYZ bill. If you don't have your entire faith communities backing on that, the best thing, and what I've received some questions on already this year, is to say that you are a member of blank congregation. So just being clear that you are not speaking for the congregation, but you are an active participant of this community, and that's a nuance to hold. The last thing I'll say is around elections, you are allowed to host candidate forums, and that's a cool thing that we've seen houses of worship do. Like you could do a climate justice specific candidate forum. The rule is you just have to be sure that all candidates are invited and that they are treated impartially, and that's how that is legal. So hopefully this can just kind of brush off any hesitancy of the separation of church and state, which is much more about the church not being woven in with how the government is run, but we can show up and say, hey, we are people of faith. Here's our values. And here's what we ask of you as the leaders of our communities. I see a question here. As an individual, can you campaign for a candidate? Yes, you can do everything and anything you want as an individual. So you can, you know, like I would have to be careful because I'm kind of a community figure. So, you know, if I'm in a meeting, I'm not going to speak about candidates because I'm also associated with Earth Ministry. But to each their own with what you do with your personal time and energy. So I encourage all levels of democratic participation. Okay, so here's just a good old chart I made of our different levels of government as a refresher. If it's been a while since you've been in your civics class, we have 3 branches of government. And what we're talking about mostly today is the legislative branch. So that is the group of elected officials that pass laws. Then we have the executive branch that carries out the laws, and the judicial branch, which is the courts, that interprets our laws. This chart shows the different bodies of leadership for each level of government. So local, there's your city or your county council working on the most local level. Or heck, the HOA of the building you live in. That could be really the most local level. Then the state level is our state legislature, and federal level is Congress. Earth Ministry, WAIPL focus most of our energy on the state level, some on the local level, some on the federal level. But as our community is spread out across Washington, that's where we put a lot of our energy. Also with leadership, like pressuring our governor, etc. So let's go to our next slide. Okay, who knows Schoolhouse Rock? I'm just a Bill. Yeah. This is one of my more dense slides, so bear with me. We're going to walk through it. But this is the process of how a bill becomes a law in the state of Washington. So if you're in a different state, it's likely similar, but you want to refer to your state's legislative body to see. But given that the majority of us are in Washington, we're going to walk through this so that as we're stepping into legislative session, you have a clear picture of all of the hurdles that we have in front of us. So right now, well, actually more last week, there was bills being pre-filed. So all these bills are being put forward. And the first step is called first reading. And that's just when the bill is read and introduced and assigned to a committee. Each bill has to go through up to 3 committees before it goes to the floor for a vote. So the first stop is a policy committee. With the legislation we're working on, that's usually the Environment Committee, maybe the Health Committee or Transportation. And those are staffed by electeds that have some knowledge in that area. And there is opportunities for public hearing in these committees. So that's going to be a space where you can show up this legislative session. And we'll get to that a little bit down the line here. But that public hearing is for us to participate in the process, and it's important that we show up, because if we don't, it's a lot of suits in the room. And when I say suits, that means paid industry lobbyists. So we need to show up and humanize the process. There might be a work session on the bill in their committee, but eventually they'll get to an executive session, and that means the vote. So if you're one who likes to follow along on the state's legislative website, which is a bit clunky in my opinion, when you can look for executive session, if something is scheduled for executive session, that means it's scheduled for a vote. If it passes, then it goes to the next committee. So if there's a cost associated with it, which there most often is, it will have to go to a fiscal committee. In the Senate, this is the Ways and Means Committee, and in the House, it's Appropriations Committee. And so that's looking at what the budget line is. And sometimes there's amendments or negotiations there to decrease what the budget line is. In any of these committees, amendments can be introduced and the bill can be changed through that. And so we'll start to see bill numbers show up like ESHB. So it starts as HB, House Bill, number, but then it might be engrossed, substitute, House Bill, blah, 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 after it's been amended. The last stop is the Rules Committee. So this is where the party leadership has the most sway, and they are essentially debating, conversing about scheduling bills for floor discussion. So this is the kind of last stop. A lot of bills can get stuck there if they don't get scheduled to go to the floor. And so it's one that we often do some turnout around because we want to be able to see a vote, which is if they do schedule a bill, to go to the floor, that is called, they place it on second reading. And so once it's on second reading, it can be scheduled on the floor, and there will be conversations about it. And eventually they will call a third reading, and that's when we get to see a vote. So that's when they actually count them up, and we see if it passed or not. If it does pass, then it goes and does the whole process again in the opposite chamber. So if it's introduced originally in the Senate, it will do all of this in the Senate committees and then go to the Senate floor. And then if it passes, it has to go to the House on the other side. If it gets through all of the hurdles again, then there might be a process called a reconciliation process if amendments are different between what the Senate passed and what the House passed. So there's a whole process around that that's more complicated than we need to get into right now. But ultimately, if consensus is reached, it gets sent to the governor's desk, who will review it and either sign it into law or veto the bill, or our governor can do a partial veto, which we saw some of last session. So that's just looking at vetoing a certain component of the bill, which can get controversial. And now we're seeing lawsuits, and it's a whole scene. But generally, we see it signed with the bills that we are working on. For each of these steps, there are timelines that drive the process. So these we call cutoff dates. The legislature has not yet posted their, at least as far as today 5:30. Their calendar for the cutoff dates for this year, but there will be like a policy committee cutoff, a fiscal committee cutoff, and then a House of Origin cutoff. So that means that if the bill does not get voted out of its environment committee before the set date, it is essentially stalled and no longer moving for the session. I do know that the House of Origin cutoff is February 3rd. So this year is a short legislative session. Washington State alternates between longer and shorter sessions based on our budget cycle. So that means we only have 60 days. So it's going to fly right by, and these cutoff dates are going to come up really quickly. So they will help us kind of whittle down what we're working on. We will also have to do some pushing as we come up on the cutoffs to try to get things through. Okay, I'm going to pause there because that's a lot of process stuff. Does anyone have questions? Feel free to chime in.
I see a question in the chat about how we can track the bills at each step. And then I'm also seeing a raised hand. I think that was Dave.
Yeah, I'm interested in that question of how to track too, and that's a big question, I think. Mine, I think, is smaller. Just to make sure that I'm clear on each of the committees, policy, fiscal, and rules, is there an opportunity in each committee for the public to chime in?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do, I think would be, in my experience, they have hearings in each, and it would be really rare for there to be, I don't know if they're actually even allowed to move forward without a hearing. So yes, the short answer is there are opportunities in each. And with hearings, you can participate in 3 ways. So you can sign in pro or con. And this is super exciting because now that we've moved to virtual, this is a new opportunity for us. Last year was the first year with it. Previously, you had to be on the Capitol campus to sign in. So that's what you'll see a lot of action alerts from Earth Ministry WAIPL on, asking you to sign in pro or con. And we will walk you through that process later on in our time together today. You can also testify. So that is speaking. You usually get about 2 minutes. We actually ask that you are in contact with us if you're interested in testifying, and we can set up a time when it is strategic for you to testify. What we saw last year with the online access is that a lot of people were signing up to speak, which is good. We do want to hear from voices, and it really delayed the process, because if too many people or a lot of people sign up for testimony, then they have to extend the hearing to a second day. And that pushes back when the bill can get voted out of committee. So we actually saw some bills that got stalled because people were so supportive of it and wanting to testify. So we encourage you to sign in or to submit written testimony, which is your 3rd option. And then if you want to do verbal testimony, to be in touch with me, and I can help set that up when it makes sense and we're looking for a faith leader to speak. In terms of tracking, we have our legislative webpage that we just got live, and Lindsay is our fearless leader there with keeping things updated. So I would encourage you to bookmark it. I'm trying to get the link up here for you. And with that, we include links through to the state's legislative website. So every morning we log in and we check and see if our bills have moved, and we will update Earth Ministry's website accordingly. But you can also check and go directly through the legislature. So let's let's do this. Hey, Lindsay, you want to stop screen sharing for a sec? Hi, everyone. Oh, it's good to see your face. Okay, I'm going to turn off the faces again, though, and screen share here. So this is the state's website. And so if there's a bill that you are following, you can click through on bill information here on the left. And if you have a computer that loads faster than mine, I'm happy for you. Okay, so let's put in, this is one of the bills we'll talk about later. 5703 is one that we have an opportunity to sign in for tonight. And so this will show you where the bill is in its process. It will show you up here who the sponsors are for the bill. So the first name listed is called the prime sponsor, and they're the person who introduced it and are really the go-to leader on it. It will also show you the companion bill. So often the same bill is introduced in the Senate and the House, just because it increases its odds of passing and getting through the process. As session goes on, we'll start to see one that gains more momentum than the other, and that's where we'll focus our attention. But here in the early days, you'll see two bill numbers. HB means House bill, SB is Senate bill. They have this tracker for where it is in the process, which is pretty nifty. And then the more detailed information is below. So you'll see here when it's scheduled for public hearings, when votes are taken, they will show up here and you can click through and you can see who voted yay or nay. And it's always also great to send notes of thanks to your legislator if they do vote for something you ask them to vote for. Gratitude goes a long way. And then if you really want to get into the weeds, you can read the bill language itself. These are big documents that are a lot of policy heavy language. And, you know, that reminds me of one thing that I didn't say earlier, which is another key takeaway I want you to have from this training, which is that I'm showing you a lot of how you can dive in deep, and you don't have to go into much depth in order to speak up as a faithful advocate. So I don't want you to feel like you have to look at this bill language and try to translate it into something that makes sense before you can contact your legislator or sign in pro, etc. Earth Ministry works with folks that we really trust who have really scanned through these policies so that you can look to us and hopefully trust us to go with our recommendation. And if you're in a situation where you are talking to a decision maker about a bill and they ask you a question and you don't know the answer to it, that's actually one of my favorite moments, because it provides you with an opportunity to pivot back to why you're there. So to bring your faith forward presence back into the conversation and say something like, you know, that's a good question. I'll put you in touch with somebody who can answer that for you, or I'll put you in touch with Jessica at Earth Ministry who can track that down for you. But, you know, I'm here again because I believe that one of my prime motives as a human being is to care for God's creation. And part of that is restoring abundant salmon runs, which also fulfills our promises to Native nations, which is a crucial obligation that we have. So pivoting back in, and for me, I find some freedom in being able to show up as a person of faith instead of the policy person. Because I don't have to know it all in order to participate. So that's my little side sermon there while we're looking at the legislative website.
Yes, there was a question looking for clarification on where you can see who voted on the bill and how they voted.
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot show you that yet because no votes have been cast at this point. But if you were to see executive session here in the bill history section, there will be a roll call. So it will be a little link that you can click and a box will pop up and will tell you the yay and nay votes. So that will be coming down the road. Earth Ministries website, like I said, we'll be doing our best to keep it up to date. So we have some tools here for you all, including how you can find your legislative district. There's a super handy map that the state provides for that. And then our bills are here. Don't try to read them all now, please. I promise we'll get there. But you can click through these numbers and it will take you straight to the state's website. So you can dig in more there. Okay, so I'm going to stop share at this point. Any other questions with that kind of state level process piece? Yeah, I see Eric and then Dave.
Thank you, Jessica. Just a quick question. So every year the whole process starts all over again. So if something is not acted on, doesn't come out of committee, or doesn't get the outcome we want, we need to be ready for the long haul, right? So that every year we bring it back and until we're satisfied, right? Okay, I just want to have appropriate expectations.
Yes, yeah, that expectation is appropriate. So with some of the bills that we're working on this year, there's some big asks and big lifts that we're going for, like overhauling our recycling program, which is really important. And the legislative process is one that calls for resilience and patience. So especially in these short sessions, the years where we only have 60 days, a lot of what we do is lay the groundwork. And then when bills have had multiple years to really gather momentum is more when we will see them pass. That said, we've also seen bills just introduced and passed in a year. So it's hard to predict, but it is, also kind of a process of educating our electeds about what we want them to be educated on. So it is important to do that groundwork and know that it's building towards a multi-year goal. Dave.
Yeah. So, on this website, the state website, you can get the bill number, you can get the sponsors, et cetera, but you don't get a title of the bill. And at least I don't see one, nor do I see in like an executive summary of them. Is there such a thing on the website, or you just got to know the bill number and the sponsors?
Yeah, starting with the bill number is the place to start. Sometimes I'm clicking through something to check this.
Can I answer that? It's the bill digest sometimes will tell you, but they don't.
Where is that?
I think it's on that. It should be on that
on
page.
Each bill's page.
They don't always have one, but sometimes they do.
And sometimes there'll be executive summaries as more documents are made. Like, so the staff of the legislators and the committees are studying these things. And so they will make more documents as time goes along that will become publicly accessible. Honestly, the name of the bill too is something that is like more an organizing strategy for us as the people. It is like what we will refer to the policy as, but I guess in some cases it might still be getting decided and is less like into the policy. The policy in the process will be referred to by bill number. And in terms of Kevin's question in the chat, there's no website that tracks all the bills and the votes taken at each step for public observation. No, it's really, you have to go bill by bill through the state's page. I think there's some new tools being developed by different organizations outside of the legislature. So I've heard of one that the Justice Washington Unitarian Universalist community is using. And I don't off the top of my head remember what it's called. There is also a new database that is being managed by the Washington Environmental Council, and they're a lead within the Environmental Priorities Coalition, of which we are a member. So I think if you go, let me double check this, to their website, that might be accessible. And actually, I'm not going to spend time now double checking, but I will do some looking around for that and send it in a follow-up email, or just kidding. Lindsay found it. Lindsay, do you want to share about that?
Yes, so it hasn't started yet for the 2022 session, just because things are just now being introduced. There's not been any voting for most bills. But you can check out this bill tracker, and it has some pretty good instructions on there, actually, which I think is pretty impressive. It's going to be hard to show you how to use it right now, unfortunately, since it's not active. Yeah, if you check out the bill tracker on that list, you can see they'll show bill numbers. They'll show if that Environmental Priorities Coalition supports or opposes the bill, and even you can sort through by the tags according to interests that you have, like fossil fuels or water or forests, and then it'll show you its status, basic status. It won't go into details unless you click on them. But I think that one's a pretty easy to use function, more so than the government website.
Yeah, that's awesome. We haven't had this publicly accessible in years past, so that's really cool, and I'm glad to share it with you all, and we'll see how it works over time. Okay, and we've got a question about Take Action Network site. I don't know what that is. So Lyndon, if you want to touch base with me one-to-one, we could look into that more. The main way that you'll be hearing from us about taking action is through email alerts that we send out. So we will send action alerts that try to make it as easy as possible for you to click through, to sign in for a hearing, to submit written testimony, to email your legislator directly. And we'll do those at timings that are strategic. So I will look into the Take Action Network to learn more about it. But at this point, our emails are the main way that you will hear from us. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to
I'll also plug one other tracker that I'll put in the chat, which is the Faith Action Network tracker. That's for if you're looking for not just environmental priorities, they have other priorities on there as well that you might be interested in. So I'll put that in there.
Okay, I see a good question in the chat from Cheryl, who says, I sent my position on a bill. The response I got back was that they are not on that committee, so are not involved until it goes to the floor, and that they will keep my comments in mind. At what point is it appropriate and effective to contact my representative? Great question, Cheryl. So there is like a matter of timeliness around the whole process. So especially early on, legislators are focused on their committee assignments. And so you can, on the ledge.wa.gov, look up your senator and representative, and it will list what committees they're on. So if they are on the Environment Committee, that's something good to be aware of, as that's where a lot of our bills will go. Once we get closer to the cutoff and things start to go to the floor is when we'll do more direct, broad pushes across, whereas in the beginning it's more targeted to who is on the committees. Earth Ministry has a nifty database that allows us to do some targeted emails. So if your senator is on the Environment Committee and we're looking for their support, you might receive a personalized email from us that says, hey, you live in a target district, please send in a note. So we do try to do that level of targeted engagement. So you might hear from us throughout. But it doesn't hurt to contact when you can. And honestly, the aides are incredibly powerful in terms of controlling what gets to the legislator's desk. So if they hear from, say, 7 of us that this salmon recovery bill is important to us, it's more likely that the legislator will be aware of it before it gets to floor conversations at that timing. So I'm not going to say to not say anything. I think that momentum builds over time, right? And so also if you are trying to get a meeting or something and you end up speaking with the aide instead of the legislator directly, sometimes people are bummed about that. But actually the aide is like I said, kind of that gatekeeper. And so it's still really influential to meet with an aide, and they are keeping tallies of what they hear from constituents about, and that informs what the legislator looks at.
Some questions about committee membership and contacting them. Given what you just said, I'm curious. Okay, so my rep gets on a committee, and do they listen more to voices that come from their district when they're on a committee, or do they take everybody's voice into account from all over the state?
Yeah, in my experience, ears always perk up if you are in district. So back in the good old days, we used to walk through the halls of the Capitol and drop off Earth Ministries handout with our legislative priorities on it. We call that a literature drop or a lit drop. And we would always stop. I would do that with volunteers. And so we would always stop at their districts to try to say hello. And more often it's then that they will make time if they see that somebody from their district took the time to come meet with them, to talk with them, to raise an issue. So there is influence there. And if somebody is, I mean, it kind of depends on the individual, really. I think that some people are hearing from a lot of out of district constituents can be more of a turnoff. So that's why we try to have folks, we try to, have our community be as broad that we know folks in the majority of the districts who can wade in with their electeds directly as more strategic than like me contacting your electeds in Whatcom.
That's helpful. I'm curious too, with the committee membership, is it stacked towards the party, the majority party?
Yes.
Okay.
So the majority party, which is currently Democrats in both chambers, has the leadership, which includes committee leadership. So the chair of all of the committees are currently Democrats. If you've followed along the past few years, the Transportation Committee in the Senate has been a stale point, and the leadership of that committee has just switched this year, which is good news because a lot was getting backed up there. So it is based on majority, yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's keep moving here because these are great questions, and I do want to get to the last of our tools for you all. So let's go back to our slides here, and we'll just do a couple more, and then we'll get back to talking about our actual bills. Okay, so this next slide is kind of, I've alluded to a lot of it, but what advocacy actually looks like. So these are some ideas for how you can be a faithful advocate. A lot of people think right away of meeting with electeds or meeting with their aides, but more often we're writing to our elected officials or calling the legislative hotline. So this is a really cool opportunity that we have in Washington, where we can call this phone number and a kind operator will answer and take down your stance on a bill and pass that along to all of your legislators, which is not a thing everywhere. So it's a pretty cool service that we have. I used to joke that it's easier than ordering pizza to call the legislative hotline. Now you don't really order pizza by phone anymore, so it's not as good of a metaphor, but in some ways it's still easier because online apps are always a nightmare. So that is a quick way to convey your message. I think writing to electeds is you have more of an opportunity to share your story if you write an email, and that gets passed through. But the hotline is always a good option. I mentioned literature drops. We haven't found a creative way to do those virtually yet, but I'm still trying to think of one for this year. So that's been on hiatus since we've gone away from in-person. And then attending, which is where you can sign in, pro or con, or testifying at public hearings is a common one. And that, applies outside of the legislative process too. So I know a lot of what we're focused on right now because of the season we're in is legislative, but many of you have participated in hearings with the Army Corps of Engineers about proposed fossil fuel facilities that we do not want to see constructed. So there's this level of advocacy. The training we're providing today can be applied in a variety of different settings, though the main one that we're focused on for now is legislative. You can submit written comments, which we do have a live form for. So that will be a take-home action for you all to submit a written comment to the Department of Ecology about some of our toxic chemical reform work. Throughout, and that's not legislative, that's a separate thing. Throughout session, maybe not as much this year because it's a short session, but sometimes legislators will host town halls. So those are usually in district for folks who live in your community to meet with your legislator and provide feedback and share what's important to you and hear what they're working on. So that is a space that you can participate in and show up faith forward. And then also spreading awareness in your community is a form of advocacy. So sharing some of what you learned tonight with folks at your house of worship, in your family, in your friend group, but inviting others into advocacy with you is a way to help us grow our power together. Okay, so this last piece then is really though, what does faithful advocacy look like? Here is the template that I hope you find approachable. So with crafting your story to speak up as a faithful advocate, I encourage you to answer 3 questions, which are, who are you, what do you value, and what do you want? So we'll walk through each of those. The who are you is sharing your personal connection to the issue. So might be something like, I'm a godmother, I'm a seminary student or was, I love to fish or hike or spend time sitting on the water. I'm a human who breathes, but pulling out a part of your personal identity that applies to the topic that you're speaking on. And then also sharing your communal identity. So you can always say you're a member of Earth Ministry. We love when you do that. You can say that you are a member or you attend your house of worship. But that shows that you're part of a bigger community that gathers around these values. So that's that amplifier, Aragon Ghost Army effect that I was talking about earlier. So you frame it with who you are and then tell a story that ties to your values. So get really clear on articulating your values. We'll send you a follow-up email to this event that includes a handout that can help you craft your story in more detail, and it includes a whole list of suggested values as starting points. But you can say things like you value stewardship of creation, responsibility to future generations, climate justice, equity and equal access, getting into what it is that you are wanting to see reflected in this policy in terms of the values. And tell a story connected to your lived experience. And that, like I said earlier, this is where you'll really have your chance to connect more personally, and hopefully get into that heart space. And then the third question is, what do you want? Sometimes you want to sandwich what do you want at the beginning and at the end. It doesn't hurt to be upfront and clear about what you're there in support of. But with your closing, I encourage you to both paint a big picture and a specific ask to get there. So the big picture is we want a future where kids don't just think they have asthma and that's it, the specific ask to get there is that we pass a clean fuel standard, which we passed last year, yay, to clean up the emissions from our transportation sector. And we need them to vote it out of committee so that we can get that ball rolling. So paint that vision, invite them into that vision with their leadership as an opportunity to participate by taking your specific requested action. Let me see. I can give you an example. Do you want me to riff on an example using this format? I see at least one thumbs up, so let's do it. So one of our bills this year is looking at recycling. So I'll use that as a framework. So hello, my name is Jessica Zimmerly. I am the Program and Outreach Director at Earth Ministry and a member of Ballard First Lutheran Church. And I'm here because I am that person that is always trying to reduce my waste and taking really creative ways to do so. So I've invested a lot of my time and energy. So for example, last year at Lent, my green team at my church leaned into a plastic fast as our Lenten practice. And we found it really hard to avoid plastic in our daily lives. Even though we gave it our best, it is really all around us. And I know that that is all tied to the petrochemical industry and to our dependence on fossil fuels, which I think we have a moral obligation to really shift away from. So what I would love is if we can do this overhaul of our recycling system, like we've seen work elsewhere in Europe and Canada. We can have manufacturers take on more of the responsibility so that I don't have to spend my time Googling whether or not I can recycle my mint tins, but instead can put my energy towards being active in my community and trusting that what I do recycle is actually recycled. So please do pass the Renew Act out of committee. I think it's a really ambitious and amazing policy that I'd love to see Washington State lead on. Mic drop, we're done. Whew. So that's just a really quick off the top of my head. You will have time to practice, and Earth Ministry is always happy to help you practice. If you are crafting testimony and you want feedback, we are happy to be a resource there. But that's just an example of using this framework. I would probably add in more than I say again that I'm a person of faith somewhere in there, kind of being a broken record on that, so they actually hear it. Yeah, so that's my example. This is the takeaway framework for you all. And our last piece here, before we close out, is just to, we do have some sample testimony, but I don't think we have time for it. So I'm gonna turn it over to Lindsay, who is gonna give the broad overview of our priority bills. Remember that there will be other opportunities to go into more depth, so we're not going to take detailed policy questions at this event, just because it's already been a long evening with a lot of information download. But we do want to just have it on your radar what we will be working together on across the faith community. So with that, I'll turn it to Lindsay.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm very excited to let you know about all of our priority bills because I think they are super cool and do some great things for the state. This first one, the Lorraine Loomis Act for Salmon Recovery. If you're a part of the Earth Ministry WAIPL community, you've been working on salmon recovery and protection for years. And this is really exciting because this bill was requested by Governor Inslee. And it was produced in consultation and partnership with sovereign tribes in the state. So we're really excited about this. And what it's going to do is require tree buffers around waterways where salmon are running in any salmon habitats in order to cool the water down, since raising temperatures equals hotter waters, and salmon are very sensitive to temperature. And these hot summers that we're having, it's not good news for salmon, especially when you're in the Point Pasta Dam, that's stagnant water with direct sunlight on it. And that is lethal for salmon. So this is really exciting to provide shade to cool down the water for the salmon. And it's also shifting the standards so that we're actually improving the natural ecological conditions rather than just trying to pick up the pieces and improve the habitat loss that's already happening. We're building it out to protect in the future. And that's Senate Bill 5727. The second one is championed by one of the groups that we really like to take some direction from in policy. It's called Front and Centered, and they work with communities that are experiencing the grunt of what these bills will be talking about. So they're centering marginalized voices often and marginalized communities. And this bill is, you may know that in the COVID pandemic, there has been a moratorium on permanent utility shutoff. And what this would do is basically, oh, sorry, not permanent utility. There's been a moratorium on utility shutoff, on electric shutoff during the COVID pandemic, and this would make that permanent. So that if you aren't able to pay your electric bill, they can't just shut off your electric and leave you, when we're having climate change, that's heat waves, that's extreme snow, maybe, so that's really an important thing as the climate's changing. And it would require utilities to offer low-income customers and customers with disabilities the option of having their bills capped at 3% of their household income. So that is wonderful. And that is House Bill 1490. And our third top priority bill is called the Renew Act. And we actually had a great call just before this with the people who are working hard on that bill to create it, and that's Zero Waste Washington. And what this would do, like this was Jess's shoot, was for her like elevator pitch, her testimony was for this overhaul of the recycling system. And what I think is really exciting about this is it's shifting the responsibility for recycling to the people that are producing the plastics and selling products that have the plastic. So it wouldn't be all on the consumer, who you probably didn't even want to buy stuff with plastics in it in the first place. It's not your fault it can't be recycled. So that's really, really important. And it would require that 100% of packaging and paper products made or sold in Washington state is reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2031, which is really exciting because even though we have things that are recyclable or reusable, we can recycle plastics, we can recycle metals. Our actual ability to recycle those things is really low because of the mixes of components. So if you mix plastic and metal, you can't recycle that. You mix paper and plastic, can't recycle that. So the packaging would have to be 100% recyclable, compostable, or reusable. So that means that we can recover that and it won't be stuck in the landfill. So those are our top 3 priority bills. And we have some other ones on the website, so you can check that out later. But yeah, Jess, do you want to add anything about these bills?
Yeah, thank you. I see a question in the chat about how 1490 is related to creation care. So this is related to our values of environmental justice. and our call to care for our neighbors, and especially those most vulnerable among us. So I think as people of faith, we don't want to see anyone's energy shut off. And as our grid shifts towards increased electrification, which is something the legislature is also talking about this year, we want to be sure that there are protections in place for folks so that they don't lose access to power. So it's less of caring for creation and more of caring for the human family and doing this in a way that is just and equitable. I will say that we have other bills that we are tracking and following as well. So if you go to our website, which I think, Lindsay, if you click once more, that will pop up here on the bottom. You can see all of the bills that Earth Ministry and WAIPL are supporting. Each year we pick our top priorities, and these are the ones that we're really tracking closely. Lindsay and I are on weekly calls with environmental partners about them. We're sending you action alerts. We're really like in the weeds with it. And then we have a secondary list of bills that we are supportive of. We have been asked to support, but we just don't have capacity to give that in-depth level of support to everything. So please do see our website and look for our coming emails for that full list. I do want to bring forward one bill from it because this is your chance to sign in for a hearing that's happening tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So one of those supplemental bills, a pretty straightforward one, is that we're asking for a ban on toxic PFAS chemicals in cosmetics and personal care products. And so this is a continuation of years of work Earth Ministry WAIPL has done on advocating for the phase out of PFAS. These are called forever chemicals. They're tied to a whole bunch of health issues and developmental issues and polluting water sources. So if we go to the next page here, we have a step-by-step direction for you to get to sign in pro for this bill, the Toxic Free Cosmetics Act. And I'm gonna pull up and put in the chat here the website to make it easy for you to click through. Let me see. Okay, so I dropped in the link there, and then if you follow these directions that are on your screen, this will give you step-by-step how to sign in pro for this bill. And you'll get a lot of chances to practice this during legislative session. And we will indeed make this PowerPoint available so you can refer back to it, and these directions are on our legislative webpage as well. But if you go and you go click through the Senate, choose the Energy and Environment Committee. You have to know the day and time, so it's 1/12 tomorrow at 8 a.m. And then the bills that are being heard will pop up, and you can select 5703. And you can then select the options. So I recommend selecting, I want my position noted for the record, or I would like to submit written testimony. Again, we discourage you from signing up to testify yourself. Be in touch with us if you do want to do that. We can give you opportunities to and would love to. But the basic part is to have your position noted, and they will read that and say we have this many pros signed in, this many cons signed in as they start the hearing. So it does show the broad community take on the bill. So this is one action that you can take home with you. Another that I'm going to ask Lindsay to pull up and get in our chat is an agency advocacy. So it's with the Department of Ecology, and it is implementation of the Safer Products for Washington Act. So it's another example of our work on chemical safety reform. You have until the end of January for that one. And so there's time, and we will send you that in the follow-up notes, but that's also an example of where you can write your comment and personalize. I see a couple questions here in the chat. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Francie. It's good to see you. Some bills have received a first reading, not assigned to a committee. It's just the process. It also honestly takes a while for the legislative website to update. So sometimes it's not completely reflective, which is so annoying. But once something has been read, they have to determine what committee is appropriate. So it might be something that is a little bit hazy. So like the Lorraine Loomis Act will probably go to the Environment Committee, but there's also a committee on tribal relations. So maybe it will go there. Sometimes bills go to 2 policy committees. That should show up soon, and we'll see a lot of our bills start to have hearings scheduled next week. 1490 has first reading scheduled for 2/5. Huh. I'm not sure about that. That might be a typo, which can also happen with their website. But all committee hearings should be before the cutoff. So yeah, I'll take a look at that one, Dave. We have a question about selecting our priorities. So I mentioned we are members of multiple coalitions. The main one that we look to for our legislative work is called the Environmental Priorities Coalition. And it is, I think, over 25 organizations that work in the environmental sphere. We come together, we have a democratic process in the fall to vote on what our priorities will be. The people who bring forth the proposals are like the real lobbyists. Like, I'm not a registered lobbyist. I'm more passionate about getting you all to get to participate as actual constituents. But, you know, we do have partner organizations that have registered lobbyists on staff that are like in the weeds with the policy, and they're the ones that bring forward these and say, hey, we think these have the best chance to really move if we get the environmental community behind it. So we're really strategic in how we land on those. And then within those, we look at Earth Ministry's values, which is how we ended up on our top 3 being standing with tribes in the Salmon Recovery Act, standing with frontline communities in the Energy for All Act, and then we know our congregations are passionate about recycling. So I thought that is how we came to our top 3. And I know we're almost at time, but Sharon has been so patient. I've seen you had your hand up. So I want to just hear your question, and then we will wrap up our time together here. Sharon, is your question still, do you still want to ask your question?
I'm a Sharon, but I didn't have any questions.
Oh, hi, Sharon.
Another Sharon? Hi.
Oh, no, you have the little hand raise emoji is up, which.
I don't know how it happened. Sorry.
That's okay. That's
no
okay.
questions. Hi, everybody.
That's okay. Good to see you and hear your voice. I love seeing in the chat that people signed in pro. Thank you. Thank you. Indeed, so much to do and so little time to do it. So we like to make it as easy as possible for you. Hopefully this helped you build out your toolbox for participating as a faithful advocate and being faith forward in how you speak up. If you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to be in touch with Lindsay or myself. Our emails are just our first name. So Jessica@earthministry.org and Lindsay@earthministry.org. We will send you some more tools and the recording of this, so feel free to share that around within your green team and community. And to close, I will just answer this last question here about register your position. You are not an official representative of Earth Ministry, so do leave that blank. There's a section on sign-in where you can say who you're affiliated with, and so that's where you want to be careful to not say you're speaking for your house of worship. You can say member of blank, or person of faith, or concerned grandparent or person who breathes, you know, you can get creative with that field. They don't really want you to, but I encourage it. That is the best workaround we found with that. Okay, well, thank you for spending a good chunk of your evening with us and for putting your faith into action with Earth Ministry WAIPL. We so appreciate you, our faithful advocates, are really who get the job done. So thank you, and we are looking forward to navigating this session together and you know, speaking truth to power, remembering that we're the ones that we have the power. People power is influential.
Thanks so much.